Climate scientists just did something they almost never do. They looked at what happened in the desert Southwest this year and ranked it among the 6 most astonishing weather events of the entire century. Not the decade, the century. And the reason has almost nothing to do with how hot it actually got. It has to do with when. Because this heat wave did not arrive on schedule. It arrived months early, in a way that broke records stretching back over 300 years. And meteorologists are now openly admitting that the timing alone caught them off guard. Let's walk through exactly what happened, why the timing matters so much more than the temperature itself, and why this could be a preview of something far bigger reshaping the entire region. Here's the detail that stunned researchers the most. In March of this year, more than 300 years of weather observation had never recorded conditions like what unfolded across the southwest half of the United States. Thousands of daily temperature records were broken, along with hundreds of monthly records, and the heat was concentrated over a naturally warm part of the country, meaning temperatures over the desert Southwest and southern Great Plains climbed into the triple digits during a month when that region is typically still easing out of winter. Researchers at Yale Climate Connections placed this event on their list of the most astonishing weather events of the century, alongside historic heat waves that struck England and France so severely that England recorded its first ever 100 degrees. Reading in over 300 years of observation, and Paris endured 9 consecutive days above 95 degrees. To put an event from this year in the same category as those historic international heat waves tells you exactly how extraordinary meteorologists considered the March timing to be. But March was just the opening chapter. As the year progressed, the timing anomalies kept compounding. Data analysts tracking Phoenix specifically found that the city hit 115 degrees before summer had even properly started, weeks ahead of when that kind of extreme heat has historically arrived. To understand how unusual that is, consider the historical benchmarks. The famous 2023 Phoenix heat streak, 31 consecutive days at 110 degrees or hotter, began on June 30th. The infamous 2017 event when flights were grounded because the air was too hot for aircraft to safely take off happened on June 20th. Even Phoenix's all-time record of 122 degrees, set back in 1990, occurred on June 26th. Every single one of those historic extremes happened in late June at the earliest. This year's early season heat arrived weeks before any of those. Benchmark events, putting researchers into what they openly described as genuinely unprecedented territory. So why does this matter, beyond simply being an interesting statistic? Because the timing of extreme heat directly determines how dangerous it actually is. When triple-digit heat arrives in late June or July, at least the human body, local infrastructure, and public health systems have had months of gradually rising spring temperatures to adjust. When that same extreme heat arrives months ahead of schedule, none of that adjustment period exists. People have not yet developed heat tolerance. Cooling centers may not be fully staffed or prepared. And critically, the natural relief valve the Southwest normally relies on, the summer monsoon, is nowhere close to arriving yet. That brings us to the second piece of this story, and it might be the most important part. Meteorologists tracking long-range forecasting models now say there's essentially a certainty of what is being called a super El Niño developing by later this year, with sea surface temperature anomalies potentially reaching levels that would rank among the strongest El Niño events since the late 1870s. Here's why that detail should genuinely concern anyone living in the desert Southwest. Historically, El Niño tends to delay and weaken the very monsoon season that normally brings relief to the region during the hottest stretch of summer, which means the thunderstorms and humidity that usually interrupt weeks of brutal dry heat in Phoenix, Las Vegas, and across the broader Southwest may arrive late this year, or in a weakened form, or in some areas, may barely arrive at all. It helps to understand exactly why the monsoon matters so much to the region's heat safety, beyond simply cooling things down. When monsoon storms arrive on schedule, they do more than lower the thermometer. They break up long, unbroken stretches of dry, high-pressure dominated weather, the exact kind of pattern responsible for locking extreme heat in place for days or weeks at a time. Without that seasonal interruption, a ridge of high pressure can simply rebuild over the same region again and again, extending dangerous heat events far longer than they would otherwise last. Delayed or weakened monsoon does not just mean less rain, it means fewer natural circuit breakers for a heat pattern that, left unchecked, tends to keep intensifying the longer it sits in place. Layer that on top of a heat season that is already measurably expanding. Researchers analyzing decades of Phoenix temperature data found that the window between the first 100-degree day of the year and the last has stretched from roughly 140 days back in the 1980s to more than 180 days in recent years. This year, Phoenix hit triple-digit heat as early as mid-March, meaning the city's heat season could realistically stretch across more than half the calendar year. What used to be a defined, predictable summer heat season is quietly becoming something closer. to a year-round condition, punctuated by a few cooler weeks rather than the reverse. And this pattern has not eased up as summer has properly arrived either. Just days ago, an extreme heat warning was issued across the desert southwest, with forecasters tracking a ridge of high pressure building back into the region and bringing highs between 108 and 116 degrees, alongside overnight lows only dropping into the high 80s and low 90s, overnight lows that warm matter enormously because they prevent the human body from getting any meaningful recovery from the heat of the day before, which is exactly the kind of pattern that drives heat-related hospitalizations and deaths upward during extended events like this one. If this breakdown is helping you understand exactly why this heat wave's timing matters so much, do me a favor and tap that like button. It genuinely helps this channel keep making videos like this one. There's a broader climate story tying all of this together, and scientists are being unusually direct about it. Climate change is injecting additional heat energy into the atmosphere and ocean system, and that extra energy is not just making heat waves hotter, it is fundamentally disrupting the atmospheric circulation patterns that normally keep extreme heat contained to a predictable window of the calendar. Researchers describe this as a shift toward what they call mega, unprecedented extreme events occurring with increasing regularity, meaning events that would have been virtually statistically impossible in the 20th century are now becoming almost routine occurrences. This same broader heat pattern has already produced serious consequences elsewhere in the country this year. A historic heat dome that gripped the eastern United States around the July 4th holiday weekend set at least 148 daily high temperature records in less than a week, with Washington, D.C. recording its warmest 4th of July ever at 103 degrees, and Philadelphia experiencing 3 consecutive days above 101, for the first time in the city's entire recorded history. Weeks later, a second major heat dome developed across the western and north-central United States, with Billings, Montana shattering its all-time temperature record entirely, and Salt Lake City tying for its second hottest reading ever measured. 2 separate record-breaking heat domes striking 2 completely different regions of the country, within the span of just a few weeks. That is the pattern researchers are increasingly describing as the new normal, rather than a rare, isolated anomaly. I've even started referring to this year's pattern as a kind of relay race of heat domes, where one region gets a brief reprieve only as the same underlying ridge of high pressure shifts its focus somewhere else, rather than genuinely breaking down and giving the entire country a real stretch of relief. The consequences extend well beyond discomfort. The same hot, dry conditions fueling this extended southwest heat season are also elevating wildfire danger dramatically across the Great Basin and Southwest, where fast-moving fires have already proven fatal for firefighting personnel this year. In Colorado's high country, wildfires have already burned through more than 850 structures, including hundreds of homes, a devastating reminder that extreme extended heat rarely arrives as a standalone hazard. It tends to drag wildfire risk, drought conditions, and power grid strain along with it. So, what does all of this actually mean if you live in or near the desert Southwest, or anywhere dealing with an increasingly unpredictable heat season? First, do not assume the traditional calendar still applies. If extreme heat can arrive months early and linger months longer than it used to, treating summer heat safety as a June through August concern alone is no longer a reliable strategy. Second, do not count on monsoon relief on its usual schedule this year, given the developing super El Niño pattern that historically delays and weakens exactly that kind of seasonal relief. Third, pay close to overnight low temperatures during heat events, not just daytime highs, since warm nights that prevent your body from recovering are one of the most dangerous and least talked about parts of an extended heat wave like this one. Public health researchers who study heat mortality consistently point out that the most dangerous heat events are rarely the ones with the single highest daytime temperature. They are the ones that last the longest without a break, because the human body's ability to cope with heat depends heavily on periodic relief, whether that comes from a cooler night, a passing storm, or simply a day or two of milder conditions. An extended heat season with a delayed monsoon removes exactly that kind of relief, which is part of why researchers are treating this year's early, expanding heat pattern as a genuine public health concern rather than simply an uncomfortable inconvenience. This also has real implications for anyone planning outdoor work, travel, or events across the region this year. Construction crews, agricultural workers, and anyone spending extended time outdoors in the desert Southwest may need to rethink traditional scheduling that assumes cooler mornings or a monsoon break partway through summer. Emergency room data from previous extreme heat years shows a clear pattern. Heat-related hospital visits climb sharply during unbroken stretches of extreme heat, and drop noticeably once even a brief cooling event interrupts the pattern. Without that seasonal interruption arriving on time this year, the risk of a prolonged uninterrupted heat health crisis becomes significantly more plausible. The bigger takeaway here is that this heat wave did not become historically significant because of a single scorching afternoon. It became significant because it broke the calendar itself, arriving early, expanding the length of an already long heat season and setting up a summer where the usual relief valve may show up late or weakened. Climate scientists rank events like this among the most astonishing of the century for a reason. When the timing of extreme weather itself becomes unprecedented, it forces an entirely new level of preparation, one built not around when heat used to arrive, but around when it is actually arriving now. That shift in thinking from a fixed seasonal calendar to a genuinely year-round awareness of heat risk may end up being the most lasting consequence of everything that happened in the desert Southwest this year, long after this particular heat wave finally breaks. If this video helped you understand exactly what nobody predicted about this year's desert Southwest heat, make sure you are subscribed, because there's a lot more of this kind of breakdown coming, and you will not want to miss it.